Uh-oh. Stinky! Well, Monster Hunter Wilds is finally upon us, and after about 30 hours of playing and hitting just a little over Hunter rank 50 at the time of recording this, I have some thoughts on it. While I did start the series with the release of World back in 2018, I have gone back and played many of the games throughout the series and have a combined playtime of well over 1,000 hours throughout all the various Monster Hunter games I've played. So please know that everything I have to say about Wilds comes from a place of endearment for the series. I would go so far as to say that Monster Hunter is my favorite game series of all time. And I will say that even the worst Monster Hunter game is still better than the best Monster Hunter clone. No offense to Wild Hearts or God Eater, I've enjoyed those games too, but there's something that they lack that really only Monster Hunter itself delivers. And just for full transparency, while I am aware of the performance issues on the PC version of Monster Hunter Wild, I did play the game on PS5 and experienced virtually no performance issues outside of a few frame rate drops when loading into a new area. Oh my god. The frame rate drop was f***ing crazy. Holy shit. If you saw my video on the beta test for Monster Hunter Wilds, you'd note that I did have some performance issues in that and experienced a few glitches and crashes, and I'm happy to say that those were not my experience in the main game. And with that out of the way, let's get into the main meat of the review. Starting with the positives before we really carve into the negatives. The first of the positives I'd like to discuss is that out of the weapons I've played, I do like the changes that Wilds brings to their movesets. Out of the 14 weapons, the only weapons that I've really played extensively throughout my time with the main game of Monster Hunter Wilds have been the longsword as my primary, with my secondary being the gun lance, usually swapping between them every few hunts, and for some monsters that I feel are more suited towards fighting with the gun lance, or at least ones where I personally prefer more block-oriented playstyle versus dodging and countering. The longsword gets a whole new level to the spirit gauge that slightly alters your moveset and lets you use spirit combos without draining any of the energy. Instead, the energy will just drain over time, and where in Monster Hunter World you'd want to use your Spirit Helmbreaker as soon as possible once getting to that red level, in this you want to wait until the gauge is virtually empty, and then you use the Spirit Helmbreaker. I really love the changes to the Gunlance's moveset too, along with the inherent buffs from the new Perfect Guard system where you can block at just the right time and execute a perfect guard that doesn't reduce stamina and significantly reduces the amount of HP lost. The gun lance has also gotten a whole new combo added, as well as increased mobility during shelling. The gun lance had always been one of the least popular weapons in Monster Hunter, so I'm glad that it is finally getting some love. Of course, I can't talk about changes to weapons without bringing up the new focus mode, which is one of the main features added for Monster Hunter Wilds. In my beta impressions video, I was pretty lukewarm on the focus mode, and I found that going between aiming with the right stick and using the face buttons for attacks was a bit cumbersome, and that was until I discovered that in the menus there was a gyro aim setting, and from there it was basically off to the races for me. Pressing L2 and using the gyro aim to refocus the camera has basically become second nature to me at this point, and it's kind of nice that I can basically go a whole hunt without even touching the right stick. Of course, while re-aiming the camera is a nice feature for focus mode, the primary use of it is actually to interact with the new wound system. When you do enough damage to a monster, it gets these wounds on it that if you press R1 on the PlayStation controller, you'll do a special attack that'll break the wound. This puts the monster in a kind of stunned state. They'll kind of stand there like a deer in the headlights while you wail on them and destroy their wound. And after destroying one of these wounds, you'll get a random monster part, usually a scale or a hide or something like that. While I was initially worried that this would lead to getting too many parts and would kind of trivialize the hunts, I did find out through playing that this actually replaced the shiny drop system. In the older games, if you did enough damage to a monster, they would drop a little shiny piece that you'd pick up and get a random piece of monster. This essentially replaces that. What's interesting is that some monsters even gain a weak point right before they're about to do one of their signature attacks. If you're holding L2, and you'll see that sometimes their mouth or their tail or whatever part would be doing the attack will be glowing red. If you do your focus strike attack on them, you'll actually interrupt them and prevent them from doing that attack. Another positive for the game, and one of the few non-spoiler story-based positives I'll give it, is that I do enjoy that the Hunters Guild has a significantly stronger presence. There's always been references to the Hunters Guild as an organization in the Monster Hunter series, but in this one it just feels like they have a more active role in the story. Your handler is constantly stating that before any hunts that you're given authorization for the hunt by the guild, and there will be various members of the Hunters Guild and the expedition team that play a much more active role in the story, for better or worse. Most notably, of course, is your handler Alma will actually go out with you on hunts and follow along with you. Sometimes she'll even pick up items along the way while following behind you on the way to a monster. After Monster Hunter World's handler that would say, "We did it," after basically just sitting around at camp the whole game while you did everything.
Well, we did it.
We? Who's we? There is no we.
It was definitely refreshing to see the handler actually out on the hunts with me. Another big positive that I'll give to Monster Hunter Wilds is that, unlike Monster Hunter World, where a lot of the weapons were basically just bone or iron weapons copy-pasted with monster parts on them, every single weapon in this game has a unique design. While that was previously the standard in old Monster Hunter games, I definitely feared that the copied and pasted iron and bone weapons would have been the new standard going forward, and that we were only going to see the unique weapon designs in the portable titles like Rise. I also did enjoy all of the new monster designs as well as their fights, except maybe Rompopolo.
Okay, yeah, look at this. This thing is disgusting.
Oh, it's big.
It's big. It's big.
Oh, I don't like that it's big. Well, okay, it's not that big.
It's not that big, but it's not that small.
It's all fleshy.
It's fleshy. It's fleshy, and it's.
His fight was fun, but there was just something so viscerally disgusting about this creature. The way it inflates and deflates and gets all saggy. I kind of liked hunting it. I kind of want to hunt more of it. Unfortunately, the game doesn't have any sort of mechanics where you can hunt a monster to extinction. I will say the game definitely skews pretty hard in a direction towards monster types that weren't in Monster Hunter World. A lot of the new monsters are of the Leviathan type, a monster type which was famously cut from Monster Hunter World after the first trailer featured a Leviathan Lagiacrus within it. We also got new monsters in the cephalopod category for the first time. While Monster Hunter Generations did feature a cephalopod-like monster in the form of Nikarchos, it was classified as an elder dragon and not a cephalopod, while these new monsters are classified as cephalopods outright. It does almost make me wonder if we will see Nikarchos return in a future update, as they do have pretty similar movements. The game also features a roster of returning monsters, many of which that haven't been in the game since Monster Hunter Generations. One of the final positives that I'd like to discuss is that with the larger maps comes a larger amount of monsters available in the maps. In previous Monster Hunter games, you could have a maximum of 3 monsters per map, though in this one I've seen up to 7 monsters available. While I'm sure the game has something in its code to prevent a 7 monster pileup, I've never seen more than 3 monsters ganging up on me at once. I do still certainly appreciate the increase in scope. Well, that's as far as my positives on the game go. Obviously, I'm not talking about anything inherent to the Monster Hunter series. Those are all positives, and you can just consider them implied here. So with that out of the way, let's move on to the not so positive portion of the video. One of the first issues that I had with the game right out of the gate and struck me as a red flag was the removal of the Monster Hunter language. If Wilds was your first Monster Hunter, you might not be aware of this, but in the previous games, characters would speak in a gibberish language known in the settings as Monster Hunter language. It uses Japanese syllables, but it's all essentially nonsense. The older titles of Monster Hunter 1 all the way through Generations, this was the only language spoken by characters. Starting in Monster Hunter World, but continuing into Monster Hunter Rise, the Monster Hunter language was no longer the default, but it was available within the menu options. But now it's gone. I was shocked looking through the language options, and I figured there has to be some way it's buried in some menu somewhere. But no, they just removed it. In all likelihood, this is because this game has a larger focus on the narrative story, which is fully voice acted. In my playthrough, I set the language to Japanese, as I found the English voices to be kinda grating. The whole low-rank story narrative was mostly pretty dull. I really don't even feel like going into it. There's really not a whole lot that happened. I mean, if you ask me, it felt like there was about 10 hours of filler and about 3 hours of actually interesting content right at the end. This is one of the few games that actually dips into the ancient civilization as a story concept, and there is some cool stuff in there, I will admit, but again, it was primarily a snooze fest. And even when it did get going, in the moments where there was epic monster clashes and all this stuff about the ancient civilization and synthetic monsters, it all just felt like it was getting in the way of playing the game. You'd have these long, multi-minute long sections where you're riding on the back of your sacred mount, and people are just talking to you, and you can't do anything, you can't pass them, you can collect items on your way, but you're just sitting and listening to dialogue that's virtually about nothing. This is only an issue in the low-rank section of the game, which is only about, 10-15 hours. And considering these are games you could play for hundreds of hours, sometimes even thousands, it doesn't seem like a lot. But when it's your first experience with the game, and this essentially tutorial, this 15-hour tutorial is blocking you from really getting into the meat of the game, to me it kind of puts a wet blanket just over the start of the experience. To top it all off, the final boss of the low-rank story isn't even rematchable. You can't fight him again, and I guess there's no real reason to because he doesn't have any weapons or armor. Now, for full transparency, I am aware that there are data mines that point to a high-rank version of the fight being added at a later date with weapons and armor. But frankly, it's kind of ridiculous that it wasn't just in the game at launch. Another pretty glaring omission is that the game includes Gore Magala, but not its evolved form Shigaru Magala, which to me it almost feels like they're holding back content from the base game in order to bring it back with title updates. Now in Monster Hunter Rise, this was almost understandable as the COVID pandemic had affected the development of the game. But for Wilds, there's really no such excuse. While doing research for this portion, I even came across a Reddit thread, I know Reddit, but where they mentioned that they had data mined the game and found references to numerous monsters, including Seregius and Legiacris, as well as those weapons for the final boss of low rank. Strangely, no Shigaru Magala in the data leak, but it's possible that he's going to be a later update or maybe even saved for master rank. But at that point, it's strange they'd even bother putting him in the base game in the first place. I know Monster Hunter World was also pretty bad about this, and there was a pretty infamous leak came out long before the game was even released that featured numerous monsters that would end up getting rolled out through title updates, and some that didn't end up making the cut at all. And strangely, Wilds is releasing without even a Gathering Hub. Now, the Gathering Hub is confirmed to be coming in the update, rolling out about a month from me recording this. But it's strange that such a basic feature wouldn't be in the game at launch, especially one so integral to the multiplayer hunting experience. Monster Hunter Wilds is not some industry-bucking trendsetter. Adding in post-launch content for free as opposed to nickeling and diming your players is certainly always preferable, but releasing a hollow shell of a game and then drip-feeding content that should have been in the game at launch isn't something that should be celebrated. And that's not even to mention the monster roster. While I did mention earlier that I do enjoy the gaggle of monsters here, it doesn't feel truly complete. There's no Elder Dragons in the lineup, not even a single one.
Really miss my nigga.
Now, I know they did state that Monster Hunter World was all about Elder Dragons and that Wilds wasn't going to be, but I didn't read that as Wilds would have no Elder Dragons. I just assumed it wouldn't be primarily about Elder Dragons. There's also no subspecies or variants or rare species. These were, in the previous Monster Hunter games, sort of harder versions of easier monsters that would have more varied attacks, sometimes more health, hit a little harder. And they'd also have recolored armor and weapons, but they would be new weapons and armor to craft. It essentially gave you more content that they didn't have to work extra hard for, just recoloring some monsters and changing a few moves here and there. The only thing that really comes close is, I guess, that we have Guardian Rathalos and Guardian Dashagama, but I wouldn't really consider those subspecies in the same way. This ultimately leads to an end game where your loop is just either farming Arkveld for materials, the title flagship monster of the game, or fighting tempered, essentially early game monsters. And that kind of gets to my other point, that it feels like the monster lineup kind of has a strange progression to it. Like that you'll fight a Rathalos before you even fight a Yon-Cut Ku. The returning monsters that they chose to add for the high rank portion of the game are pretty much early game monsters in the rest of the series. Again, I like all these monsters, it feels kind of underwhelming if that's the whole roster, is a bunch of early game monsters. I also found the game to be relatively easy throughout playing through the low rank and high rank portion of the story. I'm certainly no god at Monster Hunter or anything, but I was wearing low rank pieces of armor all the way through the end of high rank, and the only quest that I ended up failing throughout my whole time playing the game was at the very end against the Arkveld at the end of high rank. I'm certainly not one of those people who thinks that the game needs to be Dark Souls hard or, that I need to be struggling through the game. It just feels like the hunter is either overtuned or the monsters are a little undertuned. I felt very similarly about the base game of Monster Hunter Rise, so this isn't entirely new to Wilds. But honestly, I feel even more overpowered in Wilds than we did in Rise. With the game being relatively not difficult, what that ends up creating is a sort of lack of drive to grind for better material, better weapons and better armor. If I'm already clearing every monster in, 5 under 10 minutes at most, what's the reason to try to get a better weapon, to min-max my skills, min-max my armor? It doesn't help that they completely gutted the skill system, with some skills only appearing on weapons and with certain decorations being weapon only, which all of those being the offensive skills, the best skills in the game. So you're left with a bunch of armors that you look at the skills and it's like,
I don't really want this.
I don't want any of these. There's only really a handful of armor sets that have particularly useful skills. Some of the armor sets look cool, and it is quite convenient that crafting any high rank set also lets you use it as a layered armor. But that's really the only point to grinding for a lot of these armors. It doesn't help that they removed the unique designs of the beta armor sets. In Monster Hunter World and in Monster Hunter Rise, the beta set would have a slightly different look to it than the alpha set. Now here it's just a recolor. I guess to play devil's advocate, you could make the argument that because now you can wear either male or female armors as either male or female hunter, that's essentially your two armor designs. But that doesn't really fly for me, because in World and Rise, they designed male beta and male alpha, as well as female beta and female alpha. So they've essentially still designed half the amount of armors. I also have to mention that it feels like the Palico is way overpowered in this game. They definitely sometimes felt a little too helpful in Monster Hunter World, but here it seems like they're way too helpful. There was times that within the span of, a minute, I get healed 3 times by the Palico. And I guess the obvious answer is just leave the Palico back at camp. But then it's like, why would I even bother, to craft all these cool armors for the Palico if I'm just going to leave the Palico? I just wish there was a way to fine-tune the Palico, tell it to, heal me less and focus on attacking the monster or something. One last real negative that I guess is more of a nitpick is that the characters' faces to me have a sort of weird uncanniness to them. If you look at the concept art for the game included in the deluxe edition, they clearly have sort of an anime-style art style for a lot of these characters, and I think it looks really good. But in-game, they look kind of weird. I kind of wish the game stuck with that sort of anime-style aesthetic that we had in Rise and a lot of the older games. I think it fits the series a lot better. Ultimately, I'm reviewing the Monster Hunter Wilds of today, not the hypothetical Monster Hunter Wilds of 2 years from now, when we're going to be neck deep in title updates and the inevitable $40 expansion in this already $70 game. I do really like the game. Despite everything, I wouldn't be shocked if it even ends up being in my top 5 games of the year, if not at least an honorable mention. But I've heard so much positive praise of the game that has been driving me up a wall. So many people acting like this is a game with no flaws, and it's got plenty of flaws. I'd certainly take it over a lot of AAA slop. It just doesn't feel like Capcom's giving it their all, putting their full foot forward. But that's more or less all my thoughts on the game. I really don't think I could give this game a numbered score. I feel like my feelings are too complex to quantify it with a number. But anyways, that's it for this video. If you did like what I put together here, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to keep rocking.